how Ram, who is in the nervous system, Hanuman is the hormonal system in our body.
Oh.
Hormones are very tiny. They can go through small holes, and Hanuman can do that.
Dr. Nader, it's an absolute pleasure to just be in your presence and those beautiful eyes of a neuroscientist who's actually married science with the beautiful world of spirituality. I feel absolutely honored, and thank you for joining us on Radio City.
Thank you for having me. It's my joy.
It's very unheard of, at least in my so many years of having existed on this land and also having been born abroad, where I actually saw someone who's Lebanese and is literally married to our culture. How did this happen?
It's a story of self-development and research into how we can develop the full potential of our life. And also having been exposed to civil war and problems in the Middle East, having asked questions about humans, human behavior, what do they do, what can we do about it? So I started off with medicine, trying to understand the human body, the human mind, the physiology, and then psychiatry. And then I felt that it was dealing with extreme disease. And then went into neuroscience, trying to study the brain, thinking that it's the brain that produces consciousness and decision-making. I studied it on the neurology side and on the research side also. At the same time, I had learned Transcendental Meditation from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi.
How did you meet him?
I first learned, like every other people, from a teacher who has been trained by Maharishi. And then I went to Switzerland. There was a conference on Ayurveda, and I went specially to meet him. And when I met him, it was just a revelation. Meeting such an enlightened person in whose presence you feel the whole world really starts, like the whole universe comes to a standstill. And there is that brightness, that shining presence, that attention that is there. And that inspired me a lot, besides, of course, my practice of Transcendental Meditation, which was giving me profound understanding of life and its essence.
What you just said is so interesting because I have also witnessed a war in my childhood, the Gulf War.
Yes.
And as we speak, there is a war that is unfortunately in our faces. And when we see visuals from Gaza, we think, what's going on? If I had to, for the good of people who fight with this reality that we are facing right now and we are witnessing, and we think we can do nothing about, how is it that one can find their own peace if this is impacting their lives, even if they're not in the midst of it?
First, on a personal level, peace resides within. It's by finding one's own inner self that one finds this silent, quiet, peaceful existence, which is our true inner self, which I call an unbounded ocean of consciousness, which is the self, which is Atma, the holistic value. And there you find no differences, because conflict, problems, anxieties come from generally fear of the future, fear of the present. And that it comes actually from what we call duality, the sense of there is other things that can harm you, or there are things you can't have, or you don't know where you're going. And when you find this inner stability and strength within you, and it gives you all the creative intelligence that is needed to fulfill your desires, then you are working from a platform of happiness and peace on an individual level.
Would you think that the youngsters who post a lot of stories on this, expressing anger, expressing hopelessness, that at some level there has to be a sort of acceptance of what is going on, and we be the witness of it and not the doers who are trying so hard? You know, how this fight is very, very strong in the youngsters.
Exactly. It's beautiful because there is the desire to change the world when we are young and dynamic. And when you look at it and try to change it on the surface level, it sounds and it feels, and it is very complicated and difficult. And that's what we see actually with even politicians today in the world, even those who are the well-wishers, but acting on the surface level, they find no solution. And actually that is why it's really dramatic, because there is no outcome that is positive, that is possible. The reason is they're not looking in the right place. And that life is not an aspect of material expressions, physical expressions. Life is truly consciousness expressing itself into different modes of its own self, which appear on the surface as physical and material realities. Life is all motivated by consciousness, by something that is very profound, which is within ourselves. And our research has shown that from the field of consciousness, you can actually make a difference on the surface level.
Oh, so if you had to be in deep meditation and pray for peace, whether it be in Gaza or any other part of the world, it can come true?
Actually, we don't call it praying.
Yes.
It's a mechanical thing,
Yeah.
which means it's not a religion, it's not a belief system. It's not looking for some force that comes from the outside, some supernatural something that I have to look after that will come and help me.
Yeah.
It is all within us.
Yeah.
It's actually activating the ocean of consciousness, which is the ocean of peace within itself, within ourselves, and radiating that to the environment. So it sounds theoretical and philosophical, but it's actually very simple and very practical.
I want to ask you, you went through the war and there was a struggle there. And then there's today the you who's successor of Maharishi Maheshji. And it's such a pleasure to know that there is someone who's as beautiful as you are who is taking the baton forward. But if I had to ask you the difference between Dr. Tony Nader then and today, what would that difference be? And how has he evolved from a person who had faced war to a person today at peace?
It has come through first trusting that life is made out of physical things and trying to understand the physical complexities on the surface level, to understanding that life is starting from within.
What are you projecting out there?
Exactly, and that you can change yourself, and by changing yourself, the world changes automatically. Wow. Particularly if a small number of people practice this program.
Like they say aura, or like your, like how you spread that amongst the immediate circle that you touch. Okay.
Exactly. So when you yourself settle down, and your friend settles down and finds inner settlement and peace, your group has become more peaceful. Yeah. So when you have a large number of people transcending, going beyond the surface value of consideration. Okay. So leaving your worries, leaving your anxieties, your memories, even your emotions, your feelings, your everything. Transcending means to go beyond.
Yes.
So it's like the mind is like an ocean. On the surface, it is active with activity of waves that go up and down and toss us around and take us right and left and all of that. These are the thoughts that are bubbling, that are going there. Leave them alone. And there is a technique for that. It's not just like some kind of try to do it. It's not forcing. It's not magic. There is a technique which is called Transcendental Meditation. That's why transcendental, go beyond. So what happens is the mind settles down towards the self. Because the mind is always looking for more, but we look for more on the outside. What we do in this technique is look towards the inside and find more than the most. And there, your mind naturally settles down in that ocean of mind and goes to the depths of the ocean where it's completely settled and where all the creativity, all the intelligence, all the good thoughts come from. And when a group of people do it together, we have found scientifically with repeated scientific research, and there is a formula actually about it, that actually shows you can influence the entire environment. And therefore, world peace can be created with a small group of people that are transcending, not even praying, which means there is no intention to change things. Just going back to the self, going back to the inner being, and that enlivens it in society.
Just this talk has calmed me down and I feel I'm already in a meditative field. I definitely want to ask you, you run a mathematical journal as well. You just said formula and it just caught my attention.
Yes.
What is this mathematics? And people scared of maths. I was good at it, but people are scared of maths. What is this journal about?
Well, it's called Journal of Mathematics and Consciousness.
Yes.
It's an international journal that people publish about the relationship between consciousness. Mathematics is used as a formal logic, if you like.
Is there a formula you can share with us that you can directly correlate?
As you know, mathematics has complicated formulas, of course. Yeah, we can share some formula.
Yeah? Okay.
For example, when you see an object, you think the object is the predominant value and that is the ultimate reality.
Right.
For example, mathematical article that I wrote highlights is that when you observe something, it doesn't depend only on the object.
Okay.
It's very simple. It also depends on you.
Yeah.
Because you can see it in some way, I can see it in another way.
Yeah.
The cat sees it in a different way.
Yes.
The table experiences in a different way.
Yeah.
And so the experience depends on three factors: on the subject, the object, and the process that connects the subject to the object. Which means if the room is lit in a different way, you will see the object in a different way.
Yes.
If you come and you have emotions that are not so highly inspired and you see a flower, you might start crying because you have melancholy, you feel sad.
Right.
But if you come with expectations that the flower means love, means happiness, means great things, then your experience of the same flower changes. So what actually happens is that there are three values that determine any experience.
Okay.
The observer, the process of observing, so what connects you to the object, and the object itself, of course, because the object has an effect. So in mathematics, when you define something that has three values, you call it a triple.
Right.
And so you put it between parentheses, and you say what I put in the first place is the subject, what I put in the middle is the process, and what I put at the end is the object.
Okay.
And so now this triple defines a moment of experience.
Okay.
So I call the moment of experience a bit of consciousness, the unit of consciousness. So this is how you start building logic, you know.
And this is something you've done. You've contributed as a neuroscientist yourself.
Yes, this was my idea about how we can build up in a formal logic. Formal logic means what we are talking now is being logical. You're asking me questions, I try to answer. So there is a logic. Some people might understand what we're saying in a different way. So what mathematics does is choose symbols and defines them and then puts them together. So the logic is understood based on what we call formal logic.
Got it.
And so that's how mathematics can help.
Dr. Nader, I've enjoyed this. But the one question popping in my head right now, is it true, this statement? I need you to elaborate. We choose happiness every day as an emotion to be able to be that subject and object and the experience of it. And I see a lot of people who choose to be critics and run things down or feel depressed or feel hopeless about things. And this is not even people who are facing something very drastic in their lives.
Yeah.
Why are we in this state of flux, of ungratefulness, of being completely in the dark? What is surrounding, especially the youngsters, I'm speaking on their behalf, what do you feel is gone so astray, so to say?
It's the focus too much on the object.
Overfocus.
Overfocus on the object, which means my life depends on what happens in the outside. And not being self-reliant, and know that we are the master of our destiny if we are actually well anchored within ourselves. You know, if you have a ship on the surface of the water and there is a storm in the ocean, the ship is tossed around.
Right.
It has no anchoring.
Yes.
If you anchor the ship very strongly, then of course there can be waves, but you feel stable, you are stable. So if we anchor our life and our inner true self deeply within, and not be what we can call a football of situation and circumstances, which means the outer world decides when we are happy. The outer world decides when we are not happy. Our expectations is based on, like, if I get this or I don't get this, and this happens and this doesn't happen, only on the surface, and circumstances change, then we are going to be like kicked around, like a football being kicked around by the players from right to left, rather than be anchored within ourselves. So what is needed is to be going and finding the peace, the harmony, the intelligence, the joy within ourselves. And it is there. It is there. It's only when we are lost to ourselves and we are on the outside, subject to what this person says, what this person accepts, what that person wants, rather than being strong and stable in ourselves, then we are having all these difficulties. And this technique of transcendental meditation, allows us to actually go deep within and anchor ourselves in a very stable level of being that allows us then to perceive things from a platform that is much more holistic, much more stable, and much more peaceful.
Do you use the social media to reach out to your audience or to the people who follow you?
Yes, I have lots of podcasts, Facebook side.
And do you find yourself ever like being addicts like we are, like, scrolling? Are you one of those, or you catch yourself when you think you're doing that a bit much?
Through transcendental meditation, I have like some evenness that has grown in my life. And therefore, with that evenness, I have this interest to share the power and desire and devotion and really outgoing possibility also, without losing the inner stability that allows me to do this.
I ask you this because a lot of us, before sleeping, the last thing we see is a screen. And more people tell us that if you're not sleeping deep enough, even if it's 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, it can impact the way your brain grows as well. For the topic of sleep and the sleeplessness in this community of people who are constantly scrolling towards this and exposing themselves to the blue light, what is your message?
It's like a computer that, gets too many softwares running, and it gets, bugs, and it starts going slowly and then goes round and round. Wow. So what you really need is reboot. It's like, okay, let's stop it. If you don't stop it from time to time, it gets all over and it gets viruses and all that. We call of these all in a human brain the stress and the strain. And therefore, at one point, you need to reboot. Now, sometimes you can't even sleep because it's going so hard. And this is where transcending helps.
I've heard that it's actually equivalent to an 8-hour sleep if you actually transcendental meditate well.
It doesn't equal 8 hours of sleep. Every state of consciousness is necessary. But within 20 minutes, you can have much deeper rest even than sleep. And that's why the deep-rooted stresses are released, not only the tiredness of the day.
The subconscious.
Yes, the subconscious ones, the ones that you've accumulated throughout your life or even from a previous life, they are there somehow, and they are tied and they are not being undone. And so when you go deeply into your state of self, these get actually naturally released.
Beautiful. Dr. Nader, my last 2 questions are related to something that I feel is serendipity in the world right now. I still have to speak to the makers. I don't know, but there's a movie out there on Hanuman, and it's actually a superhero film, and they've not treated it in a religious way. And what's beautiful about the way you studied our scriptures, the Vedas as well, we tend to put a religion or religious tag to it. But you've also written about Ramayana in your physiology. It's just so interesting. Most of us as youngsters, because we see what religion is doing in the world, we're in denial, or we're just averse to anything that might have a correlation with a certain religion. What is your message to these youngsters who feel like that? And what did you learn from the Vedas that makes you so attracted that it made you write a book on it?
Religion is based on belief. And belief means there is something you don't understand that is stronger than you, more than your intellect, and you have to accept it. And there are different theories, different interpretations of different religions, and sometimes they clash with each other. And that's why the youth is kind of maybe feeling uneasy with all of that. So science, on the other hand, has a limited perspective. So even science doesn't have a full perspective of reality, which is much more than the little scientific research that you do in the lab. And that's what I have discovered myself as a scientist and researcher. And on the other hand, through Veda, that there is much more knowledge to it. But how can we combine both so they have the best of both worlds? And that is really making science look into spirituality, look into consciousness. And therefore, here we differentiate between belief and science, and yet we don't reject spiritual values. So if you can study the spiritual values scientifically, you can prove that they work. And so what I have done under the guidance of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi is look at the Vedas from a scientific perspective.
If you could share with us 2 of the excerpts from Vedas that absolutely make sense and blew your mind away when you read them.
Well, it's on the level of the structure and function of the Veda. This is a very interesting point because Maharishi, for example, said that Veda is a blueprint of creation, that the Veda is actually the reverberation of the laws of nature that construct the universe. And since we are said to be as a blueprint ourselves, Aham Brahmasmi, I am totality. And
I'm a part of that universe.
Right, man was created in the image of God and all of that. And if Veda are also the laws of nature, so they must be in our physiology. So my research has shown that the structure of Veda and function of Veda correspond to the structure and function of the human physiology.
Could you give us an example?
There are 40 aspects of Veda and Vedic literature. Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Samkhya, Yoga, Karma, Mimamsa, Vedanta. Shiksha, Kalpa, Vyakaran, Nirukchan, Jyotish, Rig Ved, Samaved, Yajurved, Atharvaved, etc. And all of them, 40. And I looked at every one of them. But one which is really, as an example, because people know it most, yoga, for example. Yoga from Patanjali is meaning unity, unifying value. Maharishi said to me that all of these values should be present in their function. So I asked myself, where is unifying value in our brain?
Yeah.
When you look at a flower, millions of individual inputs come to the eyes and hit the retina, and then they go to a place called the thalamus. They get recollected together in the brain and made as a flower.
Okay.
But you don't realize the flower actually until it reaches the brain. In the meantime, it's just electrical activity going through your eyes and through your thalamus and then reaches up the cortex of the brain. What connects all of this are fibers that are association fibers. So I said it must be that this yoga, which is association, which creates a whole out of parts, that is yoga, must be in that part of the brain. Now, that is in terms of function.
Yes.
But that's not good enough. You can always find functions to...
But it's literally saying that when you've actually touched upon that side of your brain, you feel one with the ocean, you feel one with each other, you feel one with everything that exists.
Exactly. That oneness is created through those fibers. Now, what is interesting, and this is what makes a difference, is that the book of yoga of Patanjali has 4 chapters. And each chapter has a function.
Okay.
Within each chapter, there are a number of sutras. For example, 55 sutras, 54, 34, like that.
Yeah.
These are the different chapters. The part of the brain that deals with yoga, with its association, has 4 lobes.
Okay.
Each lobe corresponds to one of the chapters of yoga. And within those lobes, there are these specific sutras, and they correspond to specific functions inside the brain.
Okay.
So our brain, our cortex in the brain, is a replica of the book of yoga.
My God.
In a physical form.
Yes.
And this is only one tiny small example. What we're talking about, I have a book which is very thick like that explains how the Veda is a blueprint of the physiology, of the functioning of the brain, of the body as a whole. It's like you have an architectural design that you have drawn on a piece of paper, and then you have a building. The building is the physical representation of the design. We are actually, in our physical structure, the building whose architectural design is the Veda. So this is how Veda is a science. Veda is, then it becomes, a design of the laws that construct us. And this is how when we say Aham Brahmasmi is a real thing. I am the totality. Vedoham is a physical thing, not just a mental thing. And by the way, mental and physical are a continuum. They are the same.
I know it's wrong to put it like this, but when I started to meditate, it did change a lot around in my immediate circle, if I may say so. Initially, I would think there was a lot of stirring that happened, but things did calm down eventually. What were the changes that you saw in your immediate environment that made you believe in meditation at the level that you've become a guru today of the same and you preach it to the world?
Well, on the personal level, it actually made me more in control of the circumstances of my life, so that I am the master of my destiny rather than a football of situations. That is for a personal life. But then it has an effect on others. You come to a place where people are meditating or they are happy, And you feel that. You go to a place where it's tense and things have happened that are not right, then you also feel that. And what we have found is that when actually people come together and meditate together, they create an effect that goes beyond their limited presence in time and space. And that's why we are offering a solution if we want to go back to war and conflict in the Middle East or in Ukraine and Russia. The solution is not on the surface level. The solution is on the level of being, on the level of...
You become peace first,
exactly.
for the peace to exist outside.
Right, and if many become peaceful, and only we need a small group, square root of 1% of the population, to influence the world. And we've done it systematically as a research, where when we have such groups, for example, we did a big study in Washington, D.C., and predicted that. And when the number has come together, we have had decrease in conflict, decrease in accidents of the road, decrease in crime, and hospital admissions across the board of different categories are less for people who practice transcendental meditation.
Here's my last question. I'm a huge lover of Hanuman. I can't say I'm a bhakt. I can't believe we're meeting at such a momentous occasion of the Ram Mandir. What is its significance where the world says, oh, build hospitals, do this, do that? I just want to ask you, what does this momentous occasion mean to you and the world at large, and how we must accept it? And you have written a book on this, the Ramayana, or the physiology. What is that book, if I may say so? And if people are watching this, don't pick it up and read it. At least we can have a glimpse in it.
Yeah, you can pick it up and read it.
Too.
Well, it identifies our physiology develops from childhood to adulthood to wisdom and ultimately to enlightenment, full enlightenment. And the Ramayana is a story of this development also. How Ram, who is in the nervous system, develops and takes control of all aspects of the physiology. We have even Ravana with his 10 heads that's there in the cerebellum. We have obviously, if you are interested in Hanuman, for example, Hanuman is the hormonal system in our body.
Hormones are doing well, thank you.
Hormones are very tiny. They can go through small holes. And Hanuman can do that. They influence the metabolism, they influence the digestion. That's how he can burn a city. They fly all over. When they are there, they are flying, so Hanuman flies. It maintains balance between different factors.
Because he's action and he's meditation.
Exactly, and brings the healing part, how he brings the healing to Ram from carrying the mountain. And so I describe very closely how Hanuman is actually the hormonal system in our body. So this is to say that these characters have an obvious level on the history level or on the historical level.
Thank you for calling it history. You have no idea what this means to me.
But it's also real in terms of the dynamics of life, the dynamics of living, which we call the laws of nature. And so the Veda describes the laws of nature. Ramayana describes the laws that make evolution happen, how it happens in proper order. And this wonderful Ram Mandir is for me ushering in Ram Raj, which means...
Because Hanuman's going to be there, I know it.
Yes. Hanuman is immortal. So he is always there. He is always there.
This is a celebration of his Lord. It's going to be...
Yes. And so, in the reign of Ram, everyone was happy, everyone was fulfilled. And that is depending, doesn't matter your job, it doesn't matter what you do every day. The life is lived inwards. So you can be enlightened and live a simple job or a very complex job and be happy at the same time. And that is ushering in the wellness, the fullness of life from a consciousness perspective.
In a holistic way.
In a holistic way where you can be whatever you want on the surface level, whatever you like, as if it is entertainment on the surface level. Your activity becomes a joy of expressing your fullness, and your fullness is what is important from within, and that is Ram Raj.
At this momentous message that he's given us, I think I'm feeling completely whole and full right now. Thank you so much, Dr. Nader, for celebrating our wisdom in a scientific way, which I feel is so important for the youngsters, because we always are into the why of things. And I feel so privileged that we have people like you who are taking that why extremely seriously and doing such deep research. Your insights on the Vedas to even Ram and all things Ramayana is brilliant. And the fact that you said history, thank you. I'm truly honored to meet you.
Thank you. My joy. Thank you for having me.
रग रग में दौड़े सिटी